You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the big show. We certainly appreciate you guys being here. As always, the Chris Voss Show is the family that loves you, but doesn't judge you, at least not as harshly as the rest of your family. You know, you can't pick your family, but you can pick the Chris Voss Show as your family. See how that works? But just remember, just like your family, we still won't loan you money. Made that up previous show, so there you go. As always, we have the most smartest people on the show. Refer your family, friends, and relatives, though, to the show. You wanted them to be smarter. That way, when you talk to them over, the coming holiday dinners, that Thanksgiving dinner and Christmas dinner, assuming they still invite you, they'll be smarter and they'll be aware of what's going on. So you can invite them to the show. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss one on the TikTokity, Chris Voss, Facebook.com, and all those crazy places that we are, of course, on the interwebs, including Facebook, YouTube.com/Facebook, I should say. We have an amazing young man on the show with us today. We're going to be talking about his hot new book. He's a multi-book author, and we're going to be talking about his book that he has coming out August 11th, 2023. It's called Solomea, Star of Opera's Golden Age, and we're going to be talking about his insights into that. Andriy Semotiuk joins us on the show with us today. We'll be talking about that and some of the other work that he does. He's an immigration attorney, and we'll get into that as well and find out what he's up to when he's not writing all these amazing books. He is the author of 4 books, and he has, let's see here, the one that before I mentioned, A Promise Kept, a tribute to a mother's love, The Young Professional, a career guidebook for young people, and a treasure chest of humor. So there you go. He's got quite the gambit of books that are going on there. He's multifaceted, as they like to say in the educated class. He's also a current Forbes columnist, where his articles on immigration have been read by over 1 million readers. He's a former UN correspondent who wrote on immigration and human rights themes. He formerly wrote for the Southam newspaper chain in Canada. We love Canada. I'm a big Rush fan there. Former Canadian public television producer for a 1-hour public TV show in Edmonton. Clearly, I'm flunking my Canadian here. Through Shaw Cable, and he's active on all the social media. Did you do any work on my favorite show, Trailer Park Boys, there in Canada?
I'd like to say I did, but unfortunately, no, although I know about the program and the popularity of especially in the southern U.S.
Oh, yeah. Everyone says I'm like Ricky. He currently is practicing U.S. and Canadian immigration law with the Pace law firm in Toronto, and he's married with 2 adult children. Welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
Fantastic. And I love the way you started. I like the singing because that brings in the opera book that I'm going to talk about.
Oh, we did that just for you.
I like the jokes because I got a few of those I can share with you. The others
there you go.
That you mentioned.
You do have that book of treasure chest of humor, so you better have some jokes you brought. But yeah, we did that just for you. We brought the opera just for you, Andy. We were planning on having the show several years ago when we designed that. So give us your .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs? You
can get a hold of me through pacelawfirm.com, which is where I work. And Andy at myworkvisa.com is another place where you can email me.
There you go.
I might just mention that all my books are on Amazon if you're looking for the books.
There you go. Pick them up wherever fine books are sold, ladies and gentlemen. So give us a 30,000 overview of this new book, Solomea.
Okay, look, not everybody's an opera star. Not everybody likes opera. So I realize that if I'm starting with this, I've got to make it relevant to the people who are listening and to a guy like you. So how do we do that? And I think the way to do that is to mention that this book is not about opera. It's not about singing. It's about human success and reaching the top. Now, in this particular case, the person I wrote about was my great aunt,
Oh, wow.
my grandmother's sister, and this is why I wrote about her. And she chose the opera world as her place to rise to the top. But it might be for other people, sports, or it could be law or medicine, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. The point is, it's about the human experience and how to reach the very top of your profession or calling. And, to get an idea of what other people's lives are like. What I like about the book is it's a story. It's a story, and we all relate to stories. Everybody's from somewhere, okay? My background is Ukrainian. I'm a Canadian. I was born in Canada. We've been here for 120 years, my family. But back then, my background is Ukrainian. Others might be, Italian or Jewish or whatever the background. That's my background. Mm-hmm. And as a result, because it was a family member, I took an interest in her. And one of the things that intrigued me was, although she was the world's top soprano in the first decade of the 20th century in the world, and she was singing with the greatest opera stars of her age, people like Caruso. She was performing with people like Puccini and people like Toscanini. Now, for many people, they may not know any of those names, may not know about that. But put it this way, she was, like today, a famous, shall we say, sports star or movie star or Broadway play star. She was at the top of her game back then. Mm-hmm. And although the memory of these others, the people I mentioned, Caruso, Puccini, Toscanini, remains to this day, for some reason, nobody knows about this woman.
Wow.
Now, is it, I don't know, what intrigued me was, is it a feminism thing? Is it that she reached the top, but they don't want to talk about women? Or what the heck happened? How come she's forgotten all these other people are still around? And remember.
She needed someone to tell her story, I think.
There you go. And that's what I did, is I told her story. Now, part of her story is she ended up behind the Iron Curtain as World War II started, and she never got out from behind the Iron Curtain. And so her legacy was sort of tamped out by virtue of that fact. The other people were in the West. For example, Toscanini ended up as NBC conductor in New York. He was pretty famous in New York. Puccini, because of his operas, continues to have fame worldwide. Yeah. And Caruso was as famous as, for example, Pavarotti was more recently, for those people who follow music in that classical music opera world. Mm-hmm. Okay, but I want to talk to the people who don't know anything about opera and who don't care about opera. Those are the people I want to talk to tell them that there's a reason for them to take a look at this book, Solomea. Here it is here. You can see it. You wanted to say something?
I was going to ask you. Now, I see on the header here of the promo I've sent, this has to do a little bit. Her story intertwines with Madame Butterfly, the opera.
Thank you.
And I was kind of curious how that played into her life.
For those who don't know anything about opera, Madame Butterfly is one of the top operas of the world to this day. And this is the 120th anniversary of that opera's success. And the story behind that opera is worth telling. I'd like to tell it to you now. It's in the book, but I'll tell you the story. Puccini, back in the day, this is in the early 1900s, was the lead sort of composer of operas. And he was looking for a new opera, having already reached success in other operas. And one day he traveled to London and attended a play that was on in London about a Japanese geisha girl who fell in love with an American naval officer when the American Navy opened up Japan in the 1800s. And the story behind this love affair was that this guy named Pinkerton, who was a lieutenant in the American Navy, met Chiyo-san, this geisha girl, and they had a bit of an affair, and ultimately they ended up having a Japanese-style wedding. And following their wedding, they lived together for a while before Pinkerton announced, hey, I have to go back to the United States. They're calling me back to the United States. But he said, I will come back to be with you. And Chiyo's son waited for him to return. She did not tell him that she was pregnant with his son. He left and was away for 4 or 5 years until he returned. By that time, the son was 4 or 5 years old, and Chiyo's son was ecstatic that he had returned, but learned that he had brought with him in tow his new American wife.
Mm-hmm.
And so a crisis developed. The crisis is, does the little boy continue living in Japan with a geisha girl, or should he go back to the United States with Pinkerton and his new wife to lead a life in the United States? And they decide he should leave and go back to the United States.
Oh.
In one of the final scenes in the opera, Chiyo's son takes the boy off to the side and talks to him. And she says this to him as a few parting words. She says, "Look at this face. It is the face of your mother. Remember it. You will never see it again."
Wow.
And following that, the boy is left off with Pinkerton, and she commits harikari and dies.
Oh,
It's a
wow.
very sad ending to this opera, but it's very
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah.
So 120 years ago, Puccini, having written this opera, put it on at La Scala, the biggest opera theater in the world, #1 opera theater in the world, with some great stars. A lady named Storchio, who played the lead role,
Mm-hmm.
a man named Giovanni Ginatello, who played the lead male role, and so on. To his misfortune and disappointment, the opera was whistled down and booed out.
Wow.
So after one performance at La Scala with some of the top stars of the world of that day, the opera failed. And the next day, all the newspapers wrote, "Puccini bomb, no good."
Wow.
And he was crestfallen. Like he loved this opera, but
Yeah.
the audience just couldn't stand it.
Isn't that amazing? Because it's became so huge.
Yeah. He went to his best friend, or one of his best friends at least, Toscanini, and cried on his shoulder, saying, "Look, Arturo, I don't know what to do. This beautiful opera has been put down. What should I do?"
Mhm.
And Toscanini said, "There's only one lady who can help you resurrect this opera and make it worthwhile. Go see Solomea." Solomea Krushelnicka was her name,
Wow.
who is my great aunt. And he did. And she, who was then at the top of her field, the top soprano in the first decade of the 1900s, was faced with this dilemma.
Mhm.
It's sort of like, say, Sandra Bullock being asked to play in a film that just bombed with Julia Roberts. Do I take this on? Why would I?
Yeah. Why?
They were friends. And she said, "Okay, I'll do it."
Wow.
And they started, rewriting the opera and putting it on. She wore a Japanese outfit, a kimono, for 2 months straight, every day, to get herself in the role. And the problem she faced was she was 30 years old, just over 30, and she was playing a girl who was 15 years old, the Chiyo's son role.
Oh, wow.
But, the world the opera world at that time was in doubt. Could she do it? And is this thing going to make it or not? So they all clustered into this theater. It's a Theater Grande, Teatro Grande in Brescia, which is about 60 miles from Milan, where La Scala.
Mhm.
And on the relevant date, in 1904, they performed the opera.
Wow.
And unlike the La Scala performance, the audience, in this case, loved it from the very first act.
Wow. So it was really her that made the difference then.
It was her.
Wow.
At the end of the opera got 7 standing ovations.
Wow.
Puccini was so nervous during the opera, he smoked like a chimney. He smoked like 2 packs of cigarettes. Everybody was really apprehensive. Even the audience was apprehensive. Everybody was apprehensive. But it was a great hit. And it went on from there Solomea performed it 100 times before she gave the script back to Puccini and said, okay, that's it. I'm not going to perform this opera anymore. She went on to her operas.
There you go. And it probably propelled her to higher success than she had. Is that?
It's true. Mm-hmm. Now, this is a lady that performed all over the world. So she performed in Europe, South America, North America, in Africa, etc. For example, in 1928, this Solomea Krushelnicka came to New York. And that was the year, by the way, that the Chrysler Building was built in New York, if you know the Chrysler Building.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she was there. That was the Roaring 20s. And as you know, Roaring 20s jazz was the big deal. Mm-hmm. Harlem was hot. Duke Ellington and all the guys were performing out there. And so she came, and she loved all kinds of music. She performed in New York, in Philadelphia, in Chicago. She even went up to Canada. She performed in Montreal and in Winnipeg. Now, in 1928, going out to Winnipeg was a 3-day train ride. Mm-hmm. It was the Wild West. Some guy came to her performance in Winnipeg from Yorkton, Saskatchewan. It took him a whole day to get down to Winnipeg. But anyway, so she performed there, and then she went back to Europe, of course. And now, what happened to her, and this might lead us into the other part of a discussion we had before we came on here. Mm-hmm. In 1939, now she married an Italian guy. It was his last name. He was the mayor of a town called far from Milan on the coast. They lived together for 20 years. She had a very happy life, and then he died in 1936. She looked after his affairs and so on, put everything in order, and then in 1939 took a trip to Poland, to eastern Poland, just in August, just before the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was signed, and just before Hitler invaded Poland to begin World War II. And she got caught behind the Iron Curtain, and she lived in that area of the world from 1939 all the way to 1952, when she died. But she was cut off from the West and cut off from all her colleagues.
Oh, wow.
And, Ukraine was then under the Soviet Union, and she ended up under the Soviet Union. She died ultimately, as I say, in 1952.
That's horribly unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the answer to the story, or the questions, and I hope this is not overdoing it here, is her colleagues like Toscanini and all these guys, they were in the West, so they just carried on.
Yeah.
She could not carry on because she was cut off from them.
That's unfortunate. I imagine that hurt her legacy. The behind the Iron Wall sadly changed a lot of lives.
Yeah.
So there you go. But it's great that you're telling her story now, so that it's getting out there. There's so many stories that were lost in history. Some of it was whitewashing, and here in America we had a lot of that going on. So when you were growing up, through your family, did you hear the stories passed down about her?
I'll just tell you this little part. About 1957, 58, I came home as a small child for lunch from school, and I'm sitting at the kitchen table in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I don't know if you know where that is, but north there, right?
Yep.
The Oilers lost to Florida, so they're all disappointed up in Canada about that. Anyway, that's hockey.
They'll get over it.
Yeah, they will. That's true. Next time.
I'm gonna get hate mail.
Anyway, I'm sitting at the kitchen table. My mother comes in with the mail. She opens the letter and she says, "Oh, Tata Solomea Pomerla," in Ukrainian, which is, and Solomea has died. And that was the first time I ever heard of Aunt Solomea, the opera star. Later, it took, my people, my family did not want to talk about World War II and what was going on over there. So it was hard to get information about her out. But over the years, after traveling to Ukraine and visiting there, I learned more and more about her, to the point where I decided, hey, nobody out in the West knows about her. It's time to tell her story. And that's why I wrote this book.
There you go. They've written a lot of different books and covered different gambits, but this is an amazing story. I mean, Madame Butterfly, I mean, can you imagine if that had never succeeded and just gotten buried 120 years ago?
But now that you mention other books,
mm-hmm.
I know you're interested in leadership. We were
mm-hmm.
talking about that earlier.
Yes.
And just like in terms of what your interests are and what you wrote about, I've written a small book called The Young Professional. Oh. It's a career guidebook for young people going into the professions, and it's all about leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I'm not God. I'm not some great guy. I've been working as an immigration lawyer and so on. But I have a few tips for young people that I've picked up over the years, mm-hmm. because I've worked with thousands of young people, getting them work visas and so on. Mm-hmm. Lawyers, doctors, engineers, everybody, school teachers, the whole works. So I picked up 3 concerns that most people, young people in particular, but even people our age, have that are dominant in our lives. And the 3 concerns that I found very interesting were money, time, and balance. Those are the 3 concerns. Most people have 1 or 2 or even 3 of those concerns that are dominating their lives. So I wrote this book, The Young Professional, talking about those concerns and how to deal with them. And just very briefly, in terms of, for example, money, the key there I find to be to find your unique ability and put it in the service of others. This is the way that you can best compete in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. Why? Because it's your unique ability. Other people don't have this ability that you have. Mm-hmm. And putting it in the service of others makes it affordable and worthwhile for others. In the area of time, I talk about, this is a big thing for leaders, is time. I talk about the 80-20 principle, Pareto's principle, that 20% of the people do 80% of the work. The 20% of the people make 80% of the money. Mm-hmm. In anything you do, 20% of what you do gets 80% of the results. And so that's about time and how to use time. And in the case of balance, I talk about what are your values as a leader. What are the values that you cherish? Values such as, integrity, honesty, sincerity, courage, humility, whatever your values might be. Mm-hmm. And if you can imagine like a pie chart, and parts of the pie being, the values that you identify. And I can't tell you your values. Values are values to who? To someone, your values. So you have to identify them. But whatever they are, you might say God, you might say, money, you could say, art, or whatever it is, your values, you put it in a pie chart, and then you ask yourself, how much time are you devoting to each one of these values? And if Van Gogh, who spent all his time painting and ignored everything else in his life, he was a genius when it came to painting. Mm-hmm. But he was a catastrophe when it came to looking after his own life. And his brother had to step in and help him. Otherwise, he would have been, finished.
Yeah.
So balance.
Definitely, you got to have balance. Definitely. So let's touch a little bit before we go out on what you do as an immigration attorney. Talk to us about, you do U.S. and Canadian immigration lawyer. I might, me being in America, you being in Canada. Oh, Canada. The singing their national anthem there a little bit, very badly. I think I have to say it with a lot of boots, don't I? And sorries. So I'm working on my Canadian language.
I'll give you a story right away about Canadian.
Go ahead.
Okay. When Canada was being formed, they were having a big debate in Parliament. What should be the name of the country? And they couldn't agree. They were, just arguing left and right. And finally, Sir John A. Macdonald, the leader, called all the other leaders together in a room. He closed the door, locked the door, and he said, gentlemen, we're going to sit around this table and we're going to debate until we get a name for this new country of ours.
Oh, wow.
And they're debating and they still couldn't come up with a name. And then finally he said, okay, look, each one of you is going to pick a letter And we're going to go around the table with the letter. And from those letters, we're going to make up a name. And they did. They agreed. So the first guy said CA, and the second guy said NA, and the third one said DA, and that's how they came up with the name Canada.
Are you serious?
No, that's a joke. CA, you know how Canadians
You
talk.
got me. CA? Hey,
Yeah.
okay.
It grows on you.
All right.
I think a day or two, you'll catch it tomorrow morning.
I just got had hard.
I'll give you one other one. A guy goes on a boat cruise. Okay. Guy's in a bar.
There you go.
He says to a guy next to him, he says, I speak 3 languages. The guy next to him says, what? 3? What languages do you speak? He says, I speak English, I speak French, and I speak Spanish. And the guy said, say something in Spanish. And the guy says, Auf Wiedersehen. The guy says, that's not Spanish, that's German. And the guy says, in that case, I speak 4 languages. So you have some fun with it. Anyway,
Oh, there you go, my friend. There you go.
anyway, you were asking about immigration.
Yes. And what you do there.
Yeah. I'm going to introduce one little thing to you. You know, the debate right now is about the southern border. What the hell's going on there? How come so many people are coming in here? You know, how do we address this?
Is that your southern border or our southern border?
Yours, mine, and yours. I'm a U.S. immigration lawyer. Like, I practiced 10 years in Los Angeles, 5 years in New York. I got it. It was happening to the United States. And
There you go.
like, I get it every day. And it's a concern of mine, you know, as much as it is of everybody else. But here's the thing. The world is a very complicated place.
No way. You
Like,
sure?
right now, there are over 100 million people in the world who have no place to live. Displaced people, over 100 million. That's a huge sum of people. And no country, not the United States, not Canada, not Germany, no country can handle 100 million people coming in. It's just impossible. So you got to worry about who's making decisions about who comes in and who doesn't. And it should be Congress. Now, Congress is not doing very well right now in terms of the immigration scene. They need to act a little bit better than they're acting. And you know, there's a hell of a debate going on in Congress, and they can't agree to anything. But unfortunately, they have to agree. It's like, that's what democracy is all about. You got to talk to each other and come up with something.
What? We got to talk to each other?
Yeah, and, you know,
I don't know about all this.
tell a man who's divorced with a woman they got to talk to each other. You know?
Wow. That sounds like it's pushing it here.
Yeah. Anyway, this war that's going on in Ukraine, now that's of interest to me because I'm Ukrainian by background. Everybody's from somewhere. You know, some people are Greek, some Italian. I'm Ukrainian in background. Now, I was born in Canada. My family's been in Canada for over 110 years. But before that, they came from Ukraine. This war in Ukraine, initially, when it broke out almost 3 years now ago, this is the invasion, not the real war. The war's been on for 10 years now in Ukraine. It unsettled something like 20 million people. No, not 20. 12 million people, forgive me. 12 million, not 20. 20 million people, 12 million people were displaced in Ukraine looking for some other place to settle. And of that 12 million, 6 million exited Ukraine and went into Western Europe, and over 100,000 of those came to the United States. That's just one example of things in the world that are not going very well, and the displaced people and people who are uprooted and need to come to Western countries and places like the United States. It is projected that if Ukraine loses the war, that over 20 million such refugees will be exiting Ukraine, going westward, looking for places to live, such as Western Europe and America, you know, Canada, Australia, etc. That's just one country. And that's just one part of the world and some of the difficulties that we face in terms of immigration. Now, I don't have a total solution to this thing, but I do believe part of the solution is sponsorships. After World War II, I think there was something like 6 or 7 million people who were displaced in Western Europe. And a program was brought into being, Displaced Persons Act, I think it was called, that brought many people to the United States, including members of my family, perhaps members of family that you may know. And they came to live permanently here. But it was based on sponsorships that the people found. For example, I'll just give 2 examples. My Aunt Helen, came to Los Angeles in the sponsorship of Catholic Aid Society in Los Angeles. And my uncle came to the United States based on U.S. Army help. And there were others, all kinds, millions. So I think that's one of the core things that can be done to help in terms of dealing with the inflow of people coming into the U.S. If you got a family member or you have a profession where a professional, such as you're a teacher and there's teachers in the U.S. that want to sponsor you, or some other connection, perhaps you're, a Mormon and you got Mormons that are willing to help you, whatever it may be. I think that's a good way to bring people into the U.S. Those kind of people should be allowed, assuming they're not criminals and they're not, like crazies.
Most Americans are crazy, I think, so.
Would be a way of bringing them in. Now, that's not going to solve the problem of 100 million people or even close to 100 million people. But it is a way, I think it's a good way to chip away at the problem. And I think you have to have serious issues or a serious approach to getting that southern border under control. And that's stuff they're dealing with. Anyway, that's my 2 bits about the southern border.
There you go. And so if people are interested in immigration to the U.S. or Canada for help, how can they reach you?
The best way is to contact Pace Law Firm. Semotiuk at pacelawfirm.com is my email address if they want to reach me that way.
There you go. And your website, right?
Yeah. Now, I have a personal website. It's called myworkvisa.com. And on that website, myworkvisa.com, all my books are listed there. And I talk about stuff that I do, such as what I'm doing right now here with you, Chris. And, you can look up stuff on me there.
There you go. People like to do that and stuff. Right. So there you go. All right. So we'll give us your final thoughts on your book. Tell people the pitch out to pick it up and where they can get it.
Okay. As far as all the books are concerned, they're all on Amazon. If you want the book about Solomea, look up Solomea, Star of Opera's Golden Age on Amazon. You'll find it. The book looks like this with a golden cover. Same is true for the other books. Just look up my name, I guess. One last thing I would like to say is, look, the war in Ukraine is ongoing now for some time. Any help and any support that people are willing to give is something that's greatly appreciated. If I may draw an analogy, if someone broke into your house and then told you, I want to live in your house, I'm going to be living here from now on, I don't think you'd be very happy about it. That's what's happening over there. Definitely. So thank you for allowing me to be on your show and to share my thoughts with you and to be with you.
Thank you for coming. And our thoughts are always with the people of the Ukraine. We want to see that war end and their lands returned to them. And it's just devastating that in 2024 this is going on. You would think we were over this thing. And I think a lot of people thought, we're over all the wars and stuff. But here we are. Sadly, there's evil people in the world, folks. That's why we need to all be the best we can be and elect the best people that we can elect that support democracy and freedom. Thank you very much for coming on the show, sir. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
There you go. And order up the book, folks, wherever fine books are sold. It was out August 11th, 2023. Solomea, Star of the Opera's Golden Age. And, of course, you haven't checked out Madame Butterfly. It's one of the greatest operas ever. It's one of the most popular, most sung, probably, operas ever. So there you go. It's brought to you by this wonderful relative of Andy. And now we can learn more about her and the world can know. Thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the TikTokity, Facebook.com/Chris Voss, YouTube.com/Chris Voss. And if you want to buy me a coffee, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Chris Voss. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. And we'll see you guys next time.